So at this point, the application works the way it should. We read the prices from the prices text file and write the results to these JSON files. So at this point, we absolutely could stop. But I still want to make this code a bit more generic and reusable. Also, of course, simply so that we can practice what we learned. And therefore, as a final step in this application here, essentially, I want to make sure that we don't have to set up these paths to which we want to write or from which we want to read the prices here in this prices package, but that we instead set up these paths here in the main.go file, and then we just pass a value to the job struct here that includes this path information and that includes all this file access logic, so to say. Put in other words, I want to go to FileManager.go and turn these functions here into methods that are attached to a struct that can then later be passed to the prices package and to this job here, so that this job can then directly interact with that file management logic. Now that might sound a bit cryptic, and therefore I'll simply show you what I mean. In this FileManager.go file, I'll add a new custom type, which I'll name FileManager, and that should be a struct. Now, this struct should then store an input file path, which should be of type string, and an output file path, which should be of type string. Now, read lines should be attached to this struct here, which it of course can be by adding this receiver argument, where we get a value of type FileManager. And here it doesn't matter whether we use a pointer or not, because we won't edit the value. I just want to read from it. Because now read lines should no longer take any input. Instead, this path from which we want to read should now be taken here from that struct. So we can access fm here in the readLines method and access the input file path. Similarly, down here where we write this JSON data, I'll also turn this into a method by getting this receiver argument so that we can remove this path parameter and we're just expecting the data. We still need that, but the path is no longer expected. And then here we'll use fm output file path as a value. So this now allows me to use such a file manager to interact with the file system. I'll also change the name here from write.json to write.result to be a bit more generic, though we of course still will write data in the JSON format here. But I'll get back to why I did this later. Most importantly, we are now using the file manager here as well, and therefore now I'll also add a new constructor function to this file, which I'll now just name new, because I am in a package named FileManager and I'm dealing with a FileManager struct, so a function named new clearly will yield a new FileManager value. And here I expect to get my input path, which should be a string, and my output path, which should be a string. And of course, since we have the same type here, we can also write it like this. And then I want to return a new FileManager struct where the input file path is set to the input path we're getting here, and the output file path is set to the output path. And this new function will therefore return a value of type FileManager. And you could return a pointer, that would be absolutely fine. Here, to also show you that this is possible, I'm not returning a pointer, but instead in the end a copy of that struct value. Now with that done, in prices.go, I no longer wanna use the FileManager package like this, and indeed that won't work anymore. Instead, now the goal is to get such a file manager, which we include into our job. So down here, where a new job is created, besides getting the tax rate as an input, I now also want to get a file manager of type FileManager from the FileManager package as an input, so as a parameter. So I'm using the FileManager package and the FileManager struct type here as a type for the FM parameter. And now we have to store that in this tags included price job. And we can do that by adding a field here that could be named IO manager for input output manager, which should be of type FileManager from that FileManager package. With that field added here, we can set it down here in the new tags included price job function, where we can now set IO manager equal to this file manager we're getting here, so that this is used as a value. And now with that, in the place where we called write JSON, we'll now use the job and there the IO manager to call write result instead, like this. And we also don't need the path here anymore. So I'll cut that, and instead we just pass the job to write result. So that got leaner. In addition, up here where I read the lines, we now also use the job and then the IO manager to call read lines, but again without the file name. Because now, and that's now the final step, this file manager with the file names is created in the main.go file. Here, whenever we create a new tags included price job, we can and should also create a new file manager using that file manager package and there the new function. And then we set the input path, which is prices.txt, and the output path where I still wanna dynamically generate such a file name string with help of the fmt package, which must be imported. Here we now just use the tax rate variable, which is available in this loop here. So with that, we still generate different output file names for different jobs, so for different tax rates. And we then got such a file manager value, which we now also must pass as a first argument in my case here to the new tags included price job constructor function. And with that, everything should work again, but we now encapsulated this file management logic into this separate value, and the prices package therefore doesn't have to deal with that at all. And you'll see one potential advantage of doing that in the next lectures. For the moment, let's simply run this, and we still get these output files. If I would delete them and run this again, they would be recreated. So that still works as before with all that data we set up for that struct, but now using this extra file manager struct.